Thank you to everyone for joining us this evening for this important educational forum on the role of the Hennepin County Attorney. My name is Justin Terrell, and I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Justice Research Center. The Minnesota Justice Research Center is a nonprofit whose mission is to transform the criminal legal system. We utilize research, education, and policy development to equip communities with the tools needed to bring the system into alignment with the values of the communities the system serves or is supposed to serve. Tonight's a really exciting night because it's the first time we've done something like this. We aim to put our practice of using research, education, and policy development we aim to put that practice into play tonight by hosting this forum to introduce the candidates seeking to lead this important office. But more so, we aim to ensure people have the basic understanding of the core functions of this office. And so we'll spend some time doing some education tonight before we jump in with the candidates. And before we get started, I want to take a minute to say a special thank you to the Minneapolis Foundation, who has been our thought partner on this project and has lent their staff to help us pull this together. They are an invaluable partner, and we are so thankful to have their support. And so with that being said, I'd like to introduce Shonda Smith-Baker, who submitted a video for us to share with you all. And I'll kick it to my team to play that.
Hello, community. This is Shonda Smith-Baker, the Chief Impact Officer at the Minneapolis Foundation and the host of the podcast Conversation with Shonda. One of the reasons why we do the podcast and we do convenings like this is to make sure that we are listening and we are learning and we are engaging our community in the most pressing issues that are facing them in their daily lives. There is no important race that I can think of at this moment than Hennepin County Attorney because of the significant change we need in our criminal legal system. This is exactly why we are partnering with the Minnesota Justice Research Center on this forum this evening. We hope that you get to know the candidates, you understand the issue more thoroughly, and you are better prepared to vote when it comes time to take action. Thank you so much, and we look forward to your continued partnership.
Thank you, Shonda and the Minneapolis Foundation. I want to say a special shout out to Brandon Williams and Patrice, who have been working with us on this project particularly, and Sarah, who is also on the team at Minneapolis Foundation. I just can't say enough how honored we are to have folks join us tonight. As you can see, we're over 100 guests, and it's clearly an important topic that people care about. There's a primary in August, an election in November. And as you start to watch what's been happening in our community and what's happening nationally, we know that democracy is more important today than it ever has been, arguably. And so with that, I think we should get into the evening's program. I'd like to introduce our moderators. Very thankful to have Mark Haase with us tonight, who is a board member of the Minnesota Justice Research Center and also our founding executive director. Mark is a deputy Ramsey County Attorney, and he's bringing his expertise to this event tonight to help us dig into the meaning and importance of this important office. Also joining Mark is Nadine Graves, who is I don't want to mess the sister's title up now, the Director of Community Legal Services at the Legal Rights Center, and she's also the host of The Waiting Room with Nadine Graves, a podcast that you have to check out. It does an amazing job of centering the voices of folks impacted by the criminal legal system. Mark and Nadine, thank you so much for taking time to be with us tonight and lead this powerful conversation. And also thank you for sitting with me on a Saturday afternoon to record that webinar. I'll hand it to you now to cover the educational section and take care of the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Justin. Good evening, everyone. Great to be here with you. As Justin said, Nadine and I are going to do a little bit of just a quick 101. What is the Hennepin County Attorney? Why is this race important? I'm going to start with a real high-level overview. What is a county attorney? A county attorney is the elected prosecutor and lead civil lawyer for the county. Other states have district attorneys, which is a term you may have heard a lot, like on TV, that serve a similar purpose. But here in Minnesota, each county has a county attorney. An interesting side note to this is the U.S. is the only country in the world where our prosecutors are elected. In Hennepin County, the county attorney prosecutes adult criminal felony level cases and all juvenile delinquency cases, and they provide related victim and witness assistance for those cases. They also represent the county in child protection and child support cases, and they provide general legal advice and representation for the county government. Nadine?
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Justin. Hey, Hennepin County, as you know, we have the largest county in the state. Our county has the largest electorate in Minnesota, short of a statewide election. It includes almost 2 full congressional districts with a diverse population of 1.2 million residents in cities from Minneapolis to Wayzata. So the next county attorney will be serving a vast population of Minnesotans. Our current Hennepin County attorney is Michael Freeman, who is retiring after serving in this role for over 20 years. He oversees the office of approximately 460 employees handling adult felony, juvenile, and civil cases with an annual budget of $65 million, and prosecutes just over 10,000 adult and approximately 2,400 juvenile cases every year. This is an extremely powerful job.
That's right, Nadine. As prosecutors, county attorneys are often called the most powerful people in the criminal legal system. They hold vast power in determining the outcome of criminal and juvenile cases because they have a great deal of discretion in deciding to charge someone or not charge them. They determine or influence bail decisions. They hold control in the plea bargaining process, and they can have great influence in sentencing decisions.
Also, their role in things like child protection and other civil matters can have a great deal of impact on people's lives. They hold a very visible leadership role that can greatly influence how community and other system actors view critical issues of justice, public safety, individual rights, and community wellness. Changes in their policies and procedures and how they lead can have a huge impact on thousands of Hennepin County residents and the health of our communities. Which brings us to the candidates running for office that we're going to hear from tonight.
Yes, we're excited to welcome the 6 candidates for county attorney here today. Thank you all, candidates, for joining us and for running for this office. We're going to spend the next hour or so hearing from you, from the candidates. We'll start by giving each candidate 2 minutes to open and introduce themselves, and then we're going to dive into 5 rounds of questioning. And Nadine and I will switch off asking the questions, and we'll mix up the order that folks get to respond. We'll call on each of the candidates to ask for their thoughts after we present the question. For each question, candidates will have just 2 minutes to respond, and we ask that you stick to that time. This is not a debate, but instead an opportunity for community members to hear from each of you about similar issues. You may respond to other candidates, but must do so in your 2-minute allotted time if you choose to do so. Zeke Caligiuri, our reentry fellow at the Minnesota Justice Research Center, will be keeping time and holding up a colored card, giving you 1 minute, 30 second and time's up warnings. And if you go over 2 minutes and 5 seconds, you will be ejected from the webinar. Just kidding, but we might say something. With that, I'd like to invite our candidates to unmute after we call on you, and each take 2 minutes to introduce yourselves. And also one note I want to make is we're just going to use first names. We're going to not use honorifics, just to keep things simple and on a level playing field. So we'll start with you, Martha. If you could go first, your 2-minute introduction.
Okay, thank you, Minnesota Foundation and Minnesota Justice Research Center, for having us and providing us with this opportunity to speak to potential voters. I grew up in Milwaukee, the 3rd of 9 kids. Just as I was getting ready to go to Marquette and study psychology, I got pregnant. And my world turned upside down. I was supporting my daughter every other weekend, working as a nursing assistant. I wasn't making ends meet, so I had to go on welfare. This was before Roe v. Wade. I did not have any options. Abortions were illegal in Wisconsin. My option was to go to an unwed mother's home and give up my daughter, and I did not want to do that. So in any event, I got on welfare and I ended up going to school and getting a nursing degree, first as an associate's degree. And then 2 years later, I got my bachelor's degree. I practiced in nursing for over 10 years. And by the time my daughter was in high school, I wanted another challenge. I finally attended Marquette University. I went to law school. After graduating, I moved to Minneapolis and worked in private practice for over 8 years. Then in 1999, Amy Klobuchar hired me as the first Northside community prosecutor at Hennepin County. And after 10 years there, I was recruited to be the criminal deputy in the Minneapolis City Attorney's Office by Susan Siegel. And there I managed over 60 attorneys and support staff, the only person running that has managed an office of prosecutors. I enjoyed my time on the bench, but after the George Floyd murder and the rise in crime on the North Side, I needed to do more. As a judge, you can only affect one family at a time, and I felt the need to work on the whole system. And so public safety was a big deal for me. It's not a slogan. As a Northside community prosecutor and a serious crimes judge, it was my profession. And as someone who lives in the North Side and feels the effects of rising crime in my neighborhood, it's my life. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Martha. Mary, could you go next, please?
Thank you. We're at a turning point in our community and perhaps in the history of our community. And the question is, do we want public safety for everybody in our community? Because we've had violent crime increase, but we've had violent crime in some of our communities for decades. And we need to take action to do something about that. And we need to do it now. We need to rely on evidence-based practices to put in place the things that we know work. It's one thing to talk about doing these things. It's another thing to actually implement them. And I have the experience and expertise to do that. I was a public defender for 31 years. In the first 20 or so years, I tried criminal cases. I also did juvenile and child protection. So I know those systems as well. And all of this was in Hennepin County. For 6 years, I was the chief public defender in Hennepin County. And I had the opportunity to lead the second largest public law office in the state. The county attorney's office is the largest. We can practice leadership. All of us can be leaders in any capacity that we have, but it's a very different thing to manage a law office of over 120 lawyers and staff in addition to that. This is about management skills. It's about working with unions. It's about empowering people. In 2019, the National Center for State Courts did a data-based study on our office and found us to be one of the best public defenders' offices in the country. So I have already proven myself to lead a large law office. I'm prepared to lead the county attorney's office. I'm familiar with criminal law because that's been my entire career. I am a public servant, always have been. I haven't run for anything before. All of my decisions will be based on what is in the best interest, the public safety of the people of Hennepin County. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. We had a request in the chat that candidates state their full name when they start out for the introduction. So our first candidate who spoke was Martha Holton-Dimick, and then Mary here is Mary Moriarty. Next, Paul, could you go, please?
Thank you so much. I am Paul Ostro, and I'm just very pleased to be here. I want to thank the Minnesota Justice Research Center. I'd be remiss if I didn't remember Tom Johnson, your founder, who was really a giant in the legal profession and someone that I was lucky enough to know and had a lot of admiration for. I'm running for this position because I believe very strongly that my combination of experience and character and background is what is needed at this time. I'm rejecting the false narratives that we so often see now in our conversations. For example, I reject the false narrative that we have to choose between holding people accountable and deterring crime, and criminal justice reform. We can and must do both. I reject a false narrative that says that we must either support law enforcement or discipline those who violate that sacred trust, but we can't do both. I disagree with that. What's really important in this position, in my view, is someone who is vigorously independent. That's the reason why, even though I've been a lifelong Democrat, I served on the Minneapolis City Council for 3 terms as a DFLer, that I am running as a nonpartisan candidate. I think we've all seen, even as recently this week, what happens when the judicial system, frankly, is captured by partisans. And if we want to restore the faith that people have, we need to elect someone to this position who will be both nonpartisan and independent. The experience that I have is a combination of someone who led the city council, who was known as a collaborator, who was known as a problem solver, but then returned to my chosen profession, that of prosecutor, which I've done for the last 12 years. I do believe that combination will put me in a position to lead in this office from day one, and I would love to earn your support.
Thank you, Paul. Next up, Swati, could you go, please?
Thank you, Mark. And I want to thank you and Nadine for moderating this evening, Justin for inviting all of us candidates, and of course to the Minnesota Justice Center, Research Center, and the Minneapolis Foundation for your time. I really appreciate you educating the community. My name is Swati Singh, and I'm running for Hennepin County Attorney. My name is pronounced Swati, and my last name is Singh, as in song. And I say this every time. Feel free to keep asking. The Hennepin County Attorney is the top prosecutor for Minneapolis and the surrounding area. And I'm a prosecutor. I work with John Choi, doing progressive prosecution, and also handling murder, sexual assault, domestic assault cases, and everything in between. What are my priorities? Public safety, police accountability, and racial equity. And it's all 3 at the same time, because you can't have safety, you can't have justice, unless you're addressing all 3 at the same time. And you're going to notice I'm the youngest candidate in the race. I'm 37. I'm the same age as Amy Klobuchar when she first ran and won for Hennepin County Attorney. She was the first woman in that office. And when I get elected, I'll be the first woman of color in the office. So please join me. I look forward to this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Swati. Next up is Simon. Please proceed, Simon.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Simon Troutman. I want to thank the MNJRC and the Minneapolis Foundation for both hosting this conversation and the educational piece. This is a fundamental office for a moment in time where we're in the midst of a reckoning, and we need more than policy reform. We need, and every day on the campaign trail, I talk about deep structural repair. The report from the Minnesota Department of Human Rights talked about cultural change and cultural transformation. Those are different ways to say the same thing, that we need more than the right policy, but we need deep change at a fundamental level. As a lawyer, I'm here in my law office right now in Elliott Park. It's about 100 feet from Hennepin County Medical Center, where I was born. I'm deeply rooted in this community. I'm very proud of the organization and the team of lawyers that I have the privilege of leading. It is incredible for folks that are not lawyers what a group of lawyers can accomplish when they are united, when they have sound mental health, and they have a common purpose to bring justice and equity to our community. In my other role, in my other hat, I'm a twice elected city council member. We have really big conversations that we need to have. We have conversations that like others have talked about, are false narratives, that there's one group of people that want accountability and there's another group of people that want to be safe in their own homes. Uniquely, I have the experience of bringing generational, transformational leadership in a suburban context. I'm grateful to have the support of suburban leaders like Ron Case in Eden Prairie, and Maria Reagan Gonzalez in Richfield, but also community leaders and support like George Floyd's family, the trust with families who've been impacted by police violence, and community leaders like Bishop Richard Howell. We need to have bigger conversations. We need to have them now, and they have to translate into profound and deep action and change. And I'm the person to do that. Simon Troutman, I appreciate this time to have this conversation.
Thank you, Simon. And last but not least, of course, Ryan.
Thank you so much for hosting this this evening to MNJRC. You're doing amazing work in so many ways, and each of you individually have been leaders in our community on justice for a long time. And so it's a real privilege to join you. My name is Ryan Winkler. I currently serve as the Majority Leader of the Minnesota House of Representatives. I am coming to you live from my basement in Golden Valley, where I live with my 3 sons. And I have been active in this community for my entire adult life. I have spent my time in public service focused on making systems change and making a difference. When I first came to the legislature, I learned the value of bringing the community into our conversations when we make policy. When the 35W bridge collapsed, the survivors and victims of that collapse were front and center when I led the effort to create a survivors fund. The same thing, the same lesson was brought home to me as I worked to pass the state's minimum wage, to pass legislation for driver's licenses for undocumented immigrants, to legalize cannabis and provide for expungement, and a whole range of issues. If we are going to address this crisis that we are in, a crisis of confidence in our justice system, a crisis of rising criminality and lack of safety in our community, we have to be able to work across divides. We have to be able to work with community, bring community into the center of our policy making and our decision making. And if we do that together, we have a real opportunity to show once again that Minnesota is a place where justice can be at the heart of our policy. It is a real challenge for us in this generation. I'm running for this office because I believe this is where I can do the most good for this community, and I am committed to our success together.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you everyone else for your wonderful introductions. I will be asking your first question. As we all know, there are racial disparities that exist in our criminal justice and child protection systems before and when people are referred to the county attorney's office. What responsibility does the county attorney have to mitigate these disparities, and how specifically would you go about doing so? And for the first person, we will start with Paul and then go to Martha.
I think for the community to have the confidence in the county attorney's office and in our system of justice, there is no more important issue than for everyone in the community to feel that they are being treated fairly, that there is not any form of prejudice in how the law is administered. So first and foremost, the law has to be equally applied, but that in and of itself is not enough. One of the things I'm proud of having been known for at City Hall is someone who sought out new ideas, whether they be from staff or other council members. How do we do things differently? And I think as it relates to this issue in particular, that's so important, because in a large bureaucracy, we get stuck in our ways. Who are those people that are working on these issues every day, whether they be issues in child protection, in the adult prosecution or juvenile, who see the racial disparities and who have ideas about how to address it? Let's empower those voices wherever they are in the hierarchy. I also think it's really super important that we're transparent. We cannot regain the trust of the community without absolute transparency. One of the ways we do that would be what I would call a public dashboard. I want the Hennepin County Attorney's Office to be the most transparent public attorney's office in the country. And that means whatever we do, we are constantly making public the results of our decisions. We're making public the extent to which there are disparities in how our laws are being implemented. And I also would pledge that we should have public hearings where people can speak in response to that information and make judgments and give testimony on how the office must change. It's a heavy lift, but that's how we do it. We empower people, we change the culture, and we hold ourselves accountable through transparency.
Thank you, Paul. Next, Martha.
I should just leave this on. Cases are charged based on 2 things, facts and the law. Each case is assessed on an individual basis, and that's how I've always charged cases. I've charged many, many cases when I was the Hennepin County Attorney a number of years ago. We don't consider race, religion, sexual orientation. That's not taken into consideration. We looked at the facts of the case and we look at the law. And then we base our decision on whether or not we can go forward with charges. There's 3 decisions that can be made. You can charge a case, you can defer a case, or you can decline a case. And a deferral means that there's more work that needs to be done by the investigating officer. We give them a certain period of time in which to get that work done. And then they resubmit the case back and we make a determination whether or not that was sufficiently taken care of, and we move on. Also, I think those are pretty obvious things to watch out for in terms of race, religion, sexual orientation, but there also is implicit biases. And I think that we have to educate everyone, including all of the Hennepin County attorneys, on implicit biases so that we aren't doing something subconsciously to make inequality prevalent in our decision making. Child protection does have a problem. Child protection does seem to remove more children of color from families, and they have a very difficult time reacclimating them back, not only with their families, but with their communities. That has to stop. We've got to do better when it comes to child protection cases and when it comes to protecting families and their children. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Next is Paul.
I think I already answered.
Oh, sorry, I'm wrong list. Sarah Swati, I apologize.
That's okay. You don't want to risk me talking again.
Thank you, Nadine. And thanks for not talking twice, Paul. There are, of course, racial disparities in the criminal justice system and the child protection system. And I think it's important for the Hennepin County Attorney to talk about that openly, consistently, and both in the community, within the office, and at the state legislature. The only way you're going to change this disparity is by talking about it and acknowledging it and making it valid. And it's the responsibility of the next Hennepin County Attorney to mitigate those racial inequities. Those inequities, that's injustice. And the Hennepin County Attorney's job, a prosecutor's job, is to do justice. That is our one job. And how are we going to address that? Well, when I'm a Hennepin County Attorney, multiple things. One, hire from every part of the county, people of all races, all genders, all socioeconomic classes, people of all different ability statuses, on and on. It's important that the people working on these cases understand the people that we deal with in these cases and understand that they're us, they're not other. We're going to do a better job if we connect with the people that we see. Another thing I would do, I talked about engaging with the community and the state legislature. You know, there's plenty of things when you're in the prosecutor's office, you get into this bubble and people will tell you certain things, but you're in a bubble. But many times you're missing the community piece where there's the disparity, the change isn't happening. And when changes are made, they're so disconnected from what is needed. And so when I'm Hennepin County Attorney, I'm going to engage with the community, engage with all the stakeholders, and then make systemic changes to make sure we're specifically addressing racial inequity. And that's why it's part of my platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Swati. Now that I have my list correct, next up is Mary.
Thanks, Nadine. We have among the lowest incarceration rates in the country, but what people don't always follow up with is within that we have among the highest racial disparity rates. That also includes child protection. We know that, and we've known it for a long time. The time is to stop talking about it and actually do something about it. The county attorney's office already had implicit bias training. I was there when they did it. And implicit bias or unconscious bias is not something you can will away. It's something you have to measure and track. And what I plan on doing is we will look at all the subjective decision points by the county attorney. And let me tell you a little bit more about those. The county attorney decides who to charge, who not to charge, what to charge them with, whether to offer them diversion, whether to ask for bail, what to offer them, whether they go to prison. There was a study out of Wisconsin that said that prosecutors offer white people who are accused of crimes better offers than Black people. And we have no reason to believe that that's any different here. That doesn't make anybody a bad person or overt racist, but we all have unconscious bias, and we have to push through that and stop talking about it when we have the data. What I will do is collect that data. The county attorney's office does have a data dashboard, but it doesn't collect the kind of data that I've just talked about. Not only will I collect it, I will implement policies to make sure that the county attorney's office is not worsening that. The other thing I will do is work with police and other partners to make sure that their policies and practices are not perpetuating racial disparities. And I've already done that as head of the public defender's office when we put a stop to the marijuana sting that MPD was doing downtown. We also collected data on traffic stops. We know that MPD has very large racial disparities, and this was just confirmed in the human rights study. We also know that when Black drivers are stopped for minor equipment violations and they're searched, they come up with a gun in less than 0.5% of the time. I will fix those disparities when I become county attorney.
Thank you, Mary. Ryan.
This is really, in a lot of ways, the heart of the conversation we need to be having about the next county attorney and what our justice system needs to address. If we cannot address racial disparities, we will not have trust in our justice system. If we cannot address racial disparities, all of the other disparities that this community experiences in health and in education, incomes, wealth, jobs, all of those things are endemic in our community. And at the bottom of all of it is the relationship between the state and the individual and their ability to incarcerate or fine a person. So we have to get this right. The county attorney can play an important role internally within the office to make sure that the disparities that are fed into the system aren't continued or made worse by the actions of the county attorney's office. A number of us have talked about the importance of robust data collection, analysis, and using that to inform decision-making and understand better what we do. But I also think it's critically important to be engaged with law enforcement. There are dozens of police departments across this community that are sending cases to the county attorney's office. If we want to address disparities in stops, in arrest, if we want to address disparities in the kinds of policing that we're seeing, we have to work with the partners in reform in law enforcement to make a difference across the county. And the community has to be at the table too. If the community is not there telling us about their experience, sharing their problems with us, and helping to form the policies, helping to identify the worst practices, we will not be successful in creating a system that is fair, that it serves everyone, and has trust. And at the bottom of all of this has to be trust in a system, or we will not have safety.
Thank you, Ryan. Last but not least, Simon.
Thanks, Nadine. What is so critical about this conversation is that, and I'll share this example. When I was having a conversation just this afternoon about the Minnesota Human Rights Department report with a Somali man that's a volunteer, there was just a sense of indignity and patronizing, just the patronizing that the state said there are these disparities. Simultaneously, it's incredibly important that the government is speaking in such clear and stark terms that racially based policing exists in Minneapolis, and unfortunately not only in Minneapolis. That's not where the conversation starts, but one thing that I want to highlight is that we have the fruit of that report is that more than a dozen officers voluntarily participated, and that's an important transformation. Part of what the county attorney can do is build that culture of transparency, of openness, where people can speak freely about the problems that exist. One of the key reforms that I'll be responsible for is bringing something called an Office of Procedural Integrity to the county attorney's office, so that not just disparities within the criminal context, but also within the civil department. It's so important to talk about disparities with children and disparities with child protective services. We have to stop criminalizing poverty. We have to stop impoverishing people when they are held accountable criminally. And we have to create what I call a prison to labor pipeline, which is partnering with government entities and with the private sector to create massive employment opportunities. And so it's just the simple fact that if there's social justice without economic justice, we don't actually have justice. And we can't tackle racial disparities without talking about the economic disparities and the and particularly when it comes to child protective services, to treat poverty as bad parenting, as is not always happens, but I think happens too often, and then place children in wealthier circumstances, but ripping them from their families and failing to unite them when we could. That's the work of the county attorney. That's the work of the entire county. And it's the most vital work we can be doing.
All right, thanks everyone. That concludes our first question. This next question is a short one, but probably not a simple one. And this time we'll start with Mary, then go to Ryan and Simon, Swati, Martha, and Paul. Well, I'll still call on you each individually, but just to give you a heads up. Question is, how will you address the recent increases in certain types of violent crime?
Thank you. Violent crime is actually very complex. And what we've noticed in the media and in some communities is a rise in something we actually never kept track of before, and that's carjackings. But it is really important to remember that certain communities, some of our marginalized communities, have experienced violent crime, gun violence for decades. And we have to start addressing that. In terms of what I would do as county attorney, you can't hold anybody accountable unless they're actually apprehended by police. And at one point here, we knew that MPD was apprehending about 10% of people on carjackings, and countywide, it was about 24%. And so one of the things I would be doing is talking with police chiefs about, what about the other 90%? What about the other 76%? What tools do you need to do that? In terms of accountability, we are failing our youth. We need to think of youth in our entire county as our own youth. They are our future, and we are failing them in the system. We need more trauma-based programming that in the community. I would advocate for group homes in the community where resources can be brought to youth if needed, if they're not safe to go home. We closed the county homeschool, which I think was a good idea, but we didn't plan for what the alternative was other than Red Wing or prison. So we need many more resources in the community. The other thing that we need is, I'm a big fan of the Office of Violence Prevention, which is in the Public Safety Department in Minneapolis. But violence prevention is very complex there too. It's not just people in shirts that walk around who are called generically violence interrupters. It's much more nuanced than that. And there are many different buckets. There's group violence intervention. There's something called cure violence. And I'm not going to go into all these, and I know I'm using terms people probably haven't heard of, but the Office for Violence Prevention needs support. They need money. They've really only been actively funded for the last couple of years. They're building out their resources. That is the way we can interrupt violence in our community. So I would advocate for that.
Thanks, Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, you are up.
Violent crime is obviously on the rise, and everyone deserves to be safe. Everyone deserves to live in a community in which they have an opportunity to thrive. We've talked about disparities in the criminal justice system, but there are also disparities in who the victims of violence are, and they are disproportionately people of color. So when we look at creating a justice system that is going to address disparities, we also have to create a justice system that will keep people safe. Right now, with the condition that the Minneapolis Police Department is in, both in terms of its size and the lack of trust, well-earned lack of trust from the community, we need an all-hands-on-deck approach. I've been working and encouraging the kind of collaboration we're seeing with the State Patrol and the BCA to assist Minneapolis. I also think that suburban police departments need to help investigate crime, because the data shows the number one deterrent for crime is not the severity of a sentence. It is the likelihood that a person will be arrested and face some consequence. That consequence needs to be proportionate. It needs to be geared towards rehabilitation, but there has to be a response to violent crime in the community, and the county attorney's office has to be part of prosecuting. I agree with much of what Mary said about additional resources we need to bring to the table. It's not enough just to have police. We need to have community organizations involved on the ground, intervening. I've worked very hard at the legislature to deliver millions of dollars to support organizations, and I'm continuing to do so. I've sat with them. I've watched their programming. I've been with them. They do amazing work, and they have to be part of this solution too. It can't just be, but we need everyone to be part of interrupting this cycle of violence that we're in. And without it, we will continue to sow distrust across this county. It's an important role for the next attorney to address issues.
Thank you, Ryan. Simon?
Thanks, Mark. One thing we have to acknowledge is the incredible backlog in cases that we have right now. And there are a couple of tools that the county attorney has to address that. In addition to advocating for additional resources, which every good executive needs to do, we have the opportunity to pull attorneys from less critical crimes, drug crimes, from other parts of the to surge the resources to violent crimes. But specifically, when it comes to addressing and tackling the surge in violent crime, we have an obligation, we have an opportunity to partner with local law enforcement. What we did in the city of Richfield is we were able to partner with a co-responder model, where law enforcement officers, in partnership with the county, were able to hire a senior social worker and then build that program and begin to scale that program. That accomplished two things. It created the capacity for officers to deal more quickly with violent crime. It also created more resources for us to interrupt the patterns of violent crime. Early intervention. We have defunded youth programs and services like the De Novo program, like the county homeschool, without providing for necessary alternatives. We have a sacred obligation to recognize that when youth commit violence, they are expressing an extraordinary amount of hopelessness. And we have an obligation not just to lock youth up forever, but to immediately hold them accountable. One of the ways we can hold youth accountable better and more effectively is to recognize that the distance between somebody being charged and somebody being held accountable can be months and sometimes more than a year. If we can speed up the initial hearings, the first appearances, the arraignments, and get us particularly young children and young adults into services, we can disrupt those patterns of violence sooner and earlier, so we avoid the repeat offenders that are getting multiple charges in one before they're even found guilty of one crime.
Thanks, Simon. Swati, you're up.
Thank you, Mark. So violent crime has increased during the pandemic throughout the country. It's also happened here in Hennepin County. And the criminal justice system has struggled to address it. Why? Because of COVID. The court shut down for months. We opened back up again, partially, and then we shut back down again because jury members were getting sick, judges, defense attorneys, prosecutors. So we have this backlog that some of the other candidates talked about. And I can tell you from my experience, my caseload quadrupled. And many of my colleagues, their caseloads have doubled. And what do you do in a situation like this? You triage, like any hospital would do. Violent crimes are some of the most serious cases in the system. And you have murders, drive-by shootings, carjackings, domestic assaults, some domestic assaults that end up into murders. You've seen them skyrocket, and some of these perpetrators, because their trial has been set out or continued so many times, they've been released out of custody. And the thing to do is to address it head on. So when I'm Hennepin County Attorney, I would move prosecutors from the drug unit over to the violent crime unit because one, you need to address the backlog of violent crime. Two, violent crime cases have all these victims, and we need prosecutors to meet with the victims to give them the time that they deserve. And those cases are more complicated, they're more emotional, and victims deserve that. That's our job as prosecutors, to be there for victims. And simultaneously, it'll address the fact that we're still fighting Nixon's war on drugs. The Hennepin County Attorney's Office is still prosecuting marijuana cases, low-level drug cases that are simply addiction issues. It will do two things at once. So that is what I will do as Hennepin County Attorney. And on top of that, I would tap into something that the state legislature did, which is they've created the first in the nation office on missing and murdered Indigenous families. And I would use that resource to work on prosecuting the perpetrators in that and finally holding people that accountable for crimes that often don't get noticed. Thank you.
Thank you, Swati. Martha, could you go next, please?
Thank you. We don't incarcerate, the county attorney's office does not incarcerate or prosecute low levels of marijuana. That's not true. And I want to talk about the fact that it didn't take a report for all of us to realize that the Minneapolis Police Department has some serious deficiencies and their culture is broken. We've known this for many, many years, more than 10 years, and we could trace it back probably 50 or more. That's just a culture of the Minneapolis Police Department that has to change and has to be addressed and reformed. Okay, in my neighborhood, I live over north, okay, y'all? And I am an African-American woman who has African-American neighbors, who talks to my African-American neighbors, who addresses my African-American neighbors at Shiloh Baptist Church, and talks to the congregants about what they'd like to see over north happen, okay? In my neighborhood, there has been a 250-degree increase in homicides, okay? That is a violent crime. Since George Floyd's murder in 2020, we've had 85 homicides, okay? We're not talking about domestic abuse or domestic assaults. We're talking about people who have seen their father, brother, sister, their nieces and nephews, their children, and their babies caught in the crossfire and killed. In one weekend, several blocks from where I live, there were 4 homicides, okay? These are serious crimes, and this has got to stop. Another thing that bothers me is you see activists running around here protesting police shootings, of which there are 3, and they're awful. They're awful, awful crimes. But nobody's over here in North Minneapolis protesting the 85 homicides, okay? And I'm under the impression that Black Lives Matter. Don't they matter in my neighborhood? Okay? So that's what my issue is. And seriously, with regards to juveniles, the recent report on at the Juvenile Justice Center that was talked about in the paper not too long ago, parents are begging for our help with these kids because they don't know what to do. Yes, we have to have a timeout, a place to put these kids for a certain period of time. They closed the county homeschool without having an alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Paul, you get the last word on question number 2.
I think the most important thing we need to do is to stop admiring the problem. We need to stop saying this is bad everywhere, and we need to face up to it and hold ourselves accountable. There's several things that would be high priorities for me. And what I've heard from downtown business leaders, community members, and just about everyone is they're tired of catch and release. The same people getting arrested over and over again, committing ongoing serious crimes and continually being released. We have to address that. If you are released on a violent felony and you commit another violent felony, we need to be in a position where we ask for significant bail and have people help. If you are on probation or you are on parole and you violate your probation and you violate your parole, we have to create systems that protect the public. This is a small number of people that are doing great damage. Martha did mention the carjackings, which is, I would argue, a qualitatively different offense. I read somewhere only recently we're one of the top places in America in terms of the number of carjackings we have per capita. That is a type of crime that shakes the community to its core. And more often than not, juveniles are being, the petitions are being filed and they're being released, and the same juveniles are committing and they're still being released. I think the closing of the county homeschool without an alternative was a horrendous mistake. Judge Bransford said it was at the time. What we need is a state-of-the-art facility to detain juveniles, violent juveniles, and give them the treatment and the counseling they need, but to protect folks. And the last issue I would just comment on, the sale of fentanyl is a violent crime. Fentanyl kills twice as many people as gun violence in Hennepin County. And the majority of Winkler, I know you have a very tough job over there, but I do hope that you convince your caucus to give an up or down vote on that very simple legislation. All it would do would be to make the penalties for sale of fentanyl the same as they are for heroin, and we start holding people accountable for killing almost 300 people in Hennepin County last year.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you everyone for your responses to question number 2. Some of you have touched on this, but after George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, and recently the release of the Minnesota Department of Human Rights report on police misconduct, what role do you see the Hennepin County Attorney Office having in addressing the mistrust that some community members have with police? For example, improving the process of tracking and disclosing police misconduct as required by Brady and Giglio. Do those play a role for you? I know some have mentioned different tracking systems and perhaps an integrity unit. So I'll allow you all to elaborate on those points, but I'll start with Sarah Swati.
Thank you, Nadine. I read the entire Minnesota Department of Human Rights report, and I recommend everyone read it. At the very least, the beginning portion of the summary as well as the recommendations. First, I want to validate that report. It's consistent with both my personal life experience as well as my professional experience. And the things that were documented, they're horrific. Police officers calling community members monkeys and the N-word, calling Hispanic people, I won't even use all the terms. And there's all these things that are caught on video. And that report goes into detail how prosecutors, this is no secret, we see it. And sometimes we don't want to play it in front of a jury because we know what it looks like. As Hennepin County Attorney, I'm going to do something about it because I've been in this position as a line attorney. When I was at the Minnesota Attorney General's office, that was my previous job, I saw stuff like that. And I went to my boss, didn't believe me. I had to go to someone else who had more life experience and credibility, who made the call to the police department. And you know what they did? They promoted that police officer. In Ramsey County, I encountered a situation, you know what they did? They held that person accountable and they changed the rules so that that person was documented and monitored. These issues are so real. It's important for the top prosecutor of Hennepin County to talk about them, to validate them, to change the culture within the prosecutor's office, so that whenever something like that happens, it goes all the way to the top. And so that I'm the one talking with the police department. And I join in with the Minneapolis City Attorney's Office because they handle a lot of cases from the Minneapolis police officers to work together to make sure we're holding the police accountable. My time is done, but thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Swati. Next up is Simon.
Thanks, Nadine. In the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, we had officers that engaged in what amounted to a drive-by shooting. They did not announce themselves. They fired at a civilian, a retired veteran that had a concealed carry permit. The vehicle was not stopped when he returned fire. They announced themselves. He immediately dropped his weapon. That man was Jaleel Stallings, and not only was he charged with attempted murder, but the two officers involved were not disciplined. Not only were they not disciplined, and this is the difference between a policy reform and the reckoning and repair that we need to do. Those officers were on the SWAT team when Amir Locke was tragically killed. And whatever the policy is, if we don't address the fundamental cultural issues, and that was a decision that was made by the county attorney's office. And part of what that deep structural change looks like, I've called it an office of procedural integrity, because this kind of empowerment and accountability needs to exist not just for law enforcement and not just for lawyers, but in the child protective services and in every part of the county infrastructure. We need those systems of accountability, but we also need presence in community. I lived my life. I don't know how to be not present in the communities that matter. I moved my law firm from Eden Prairie to Elliott Park because it's a community that I know and I wanted to be connected to, and I am connected to it. And part of how we build trust is not by what we're going to do in the office, but you can judge me and you can judge others by where we've been all along. And so there will be a new spirit of accountability, of transparency and community connection in the next county attorney. You can count on that, and it will look and it will feel and it will be believed as the reform it has to be.
Thank you, Simon. Next we have Martha.
Thank you. All right, tracking and disclosing information on police misconduct. I've had two experiences during my practice as both a Hennepin County attorney and as a judge. One was a charging decision that I was asked to make on a suspect that actually the officer wanted me to charge with a fourth-degree assault. A fourth-degree assault is an assault. It's a felony assault against a police officer. The officer sustained a scratch. For some reason, I thought I'm going to look at more information here because I don't know, some suspicion arose in me. And so I went and looked at the booking photo for the person who was African-American, and they beat the living daylights out of him. So what I did was I came back and I sat the officer down and I said to him, and I probably took the chicken's way out, but what I said to him was, darn, I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to charge this because I have to be able to prove a demonstrable injury. And by the time we get to trial, that scratch is going to be gone. So I declined to charge that case. Now I did take probably the chicken's way out there. In any event, and that was prevalent. Come on, we all know the police were beating up, young Black men on a regular basis. That was very prevalent. And a lot of the cases that occurred. The second time was when I was in court and I was doing I was hearing an evidentiary hearing on a suppression of a gun. The officer testified as to how he went about stopping this person who was on a motorbike that didn't work, that didn't have a license, and how he arrested the guy and whatever else took place. I saw the body cam video, and that is not how it happened. It was atrocious the way he treated this person. He slammed him up against the squad car, threw him on the ground, called a bunch of other squad cars around, and pointed to him and said, "What are you trying to do? Become another statistic?" I turned that CD in to Arredondo, the chief, and asked him to at least use that during one of their training periods or sessions of what not to do. So we do keep an eye on police officers, and we have to continue to keep an eye on them. If there are any issues that come up, we have to take it straight to the police chief, and we have to take it to administration, and we have to make sure that they follow through with any investigation and any disciplinary proceedings. We are not able to get certain records from police officers. There's all these different protections like data practices and also employment records, which are confidential. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Next up I have is Paul.
The first thing I want to say is let's not pretend all police officers are the same or that all police departments are the same. The reality is, and it pains me to say it, Minneapolis is uniquely troubled by a shocking lack of transparency and frankly, a shocking failure to discipline police. It is unique to Minneapolis because of the abuse of what is called coaching in Minneapolis. I served for 4 years on the Minnesota Committee on Government Information, and in that role, I was one of several of the members of that board that worked with the ACLU to bring a lawsuit against the Minneapolis City Council and the Minneapolis Police Department for violations of the Data Practices Act. Why does this matter? It matters because in Minneapolis, even if there is a sustained violation, even if you're found to have violated the police code of conduct, they have, I suppose, in their view, cleverly determined, well, we will call it coaching. And then they say coaching is not discipline. Candidly, this was intentional. In my view, it was intentional to keep this from being public. Derek Chauvin violently assaulted a 14-year-old child and nearly killed him with the same chokehold that killed George Floyd. And he was never held accountable. We believe he may have been coached. So one of the things you need to do as a county attorney is you need, without fear and favor, to have the courage of your convictions. This is not something people took kindly to that this lawsuit was brought, but that's what needs to happen. And in the few seconds I have left, I'll just say that when I'm county attorney, we will file a Brady notice, a Giglio notice, and regardless of whether coaching or any other discipline or non-discipline is imposed, if there is a sustained violation, that will be disclosed to the defense, even if there needs to be an in-camera hearing. That is a basic procedural right of every defendant.
Thank you, Paul. Next up we have is Ryan.
Minneapolis deserves to have a professional police department that serves all parts of the community. The police department should be service-oriented, it should be diverse, it should be reflective of the community's values. For various reasons, over the decades, city government in Minneapolis has failed to provide that kind of police department. The Human Rights Department investigation and the U.S. Department of Justice investigation both can lead to consent decrees that can reconstruct the police department in Minneapolis from the ground up. Those are not direct roles for the Hennepin County Attorney, but the Hennepin County Attorney can use the office as a bully pulpit and a rallying point to make sure that a consent decree and the follow-on monitoring of the Minneapolis Police Department are strong and thorough and not subject to City Hall politics. In addition, the County Attorney's Office has an ongoing role to ensure police accountability, not just in Minneapolis, but across all police departments. I think it is too much to ask a prosecutor who works with police officers on a daily basis in prosecuting crimes to then be independent enough to make assessments about whether to charge that same police officer if they commit a crime. I believe in an independent internal police accountability unit within Hennepin County and a process vetted with the community for referring charging decisions about police killings outside of the county. I think that it is too much of a conflict of interest for the county attorney to make those decisions internally. And because of the way our world works today, politics will be the accusation regardless of the decision that is made. That's why there has to be a process. It has to be clear, it has to be vetted, and it has to be followed so that when a situation occurs, people can understand that a referral out to another county or to the Attorney General is made according to a set process and not for political reasons. I think it is crucial for the Hennepin County Attorney to play the role of accountability watchdog for police, but it has to be independent.
Thank you, Ryan. Last but not least, Mary.
Thank you. When I was doing commentary for the Chauvin trial, I remember MSNBC, BBC, all of the national stations asking me, how did MPD get to be this way? And my response was, it isn't just MPD, but the reason police got to be this way because there's never been any accountability outside the police department, and that includes prosecutors and judges. And we've just heard an admission from our one of our former prosecutors here that she knew that a police officer beat up somebody. And instead of confronting that police officer or reporting it to the police chief, she looked the other way. And that is historically what has happened with this office. And as I said, it's not just MPD. This prosecutor's office charged at least 6 cases from a Corcoran police officer. All 6 cases were thrown out by 5 different judges. 2 judges found that that cop lied under oath. When the supervisors of the county attorney's office were asked, what are you going to do about this guy? They said, we're not his employer. And that's the problem here. The county attorney's office has never taken the opportunity to partner with police leadership and show them when they see violations of policy on videotape, because it's actually prosecutors and public defenders that see a lot of the video, more so than police leadership. And so there's an opportunity there when you see even a minor policy violation to share that, so we could nip the next chauvin in the bud, that they can take this down and document their file for potential progressive discipline. And finally, a big lever that the county attorney has that I will use is that if police officers are lying under oath or engaging in abusive behavior, we will not call them as witnesses. And that means they will not be able to interact with the public. There are many more things that the county attorney's office can do that they simply are not doing now. But my time is up. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mary, and everyone. Just want to say great job on watching that timekeeper and keeping the time limit. We're moving right along here. This next question has multiple kind of big parts to it. I would say don't feel like you have to respond to each of these parts. Maybe you can find a theme, or maybe there's a couple you want to talk about. I think that all these things have some common parts to them. So the question is, what are your positions on criminal records expungement, restorative justice practices, diversion generally, and harm reduction for people with substance use disorder? And if anybody wants me to repeat that before we go, I am happy to do that. This time yes, Martha.
Please, could you please repeat that?
Sure. Is that what you're asking for too, Paul? Or do you have a more specific question? So the question is, what are your positions on criminal records expungement, restorative justice practices, diversion generally, and harm reduction for people with substance use disorder? Again, those are 4 really big topics. My suggestion would be maybe pick a couple or find a theme there about non-traditional ways of prosecuting or overall harm reduction. So the order this time, and Paul, I see your hands up. Do you have
no, I'm sorry. I did not mean to put my hand up. I'm so sorry.
No, this time we'll start with Simon, then go to Ryan, then Martha, Paul, Mary, and Sir Swati. So with that, Simon, you get to go first on this one.
Well, thank you. There's a lot to talk about in 2 minutes. But one thing that I want to talk about is what we've done in the city of Richfield, and what's so important to scale up is the power and the urgency of expungement and making expungement. And like I think other people have pointed out, it's not just about the severity of the accountability, but it's the certainty that it'll happen. And once people have been held accountable, prosecutors are in a unique position to decide whether expungement is appropriate. And one of the things I aggressively advocated for when I first became an elected member of our city council is an expungement process that became a default question that the prosecutor had to ask every time, and whether or not that expungement should be part of the plea bargaining process. And what that means is the collateral consequences to being held accountable criminally. Those consequences are opportunities to housing, sometimes opportunities for further education and educational loans, opportunities to get employment. Employment is significant. Being able to scale that, not just at the plea bargaining process, but actually looking back and proactively seeking to expunge records. It's really important to clarify for the government. The prosecutor's office always sees the crimes. They are not held, if people recidivate or reoffend, they will be held accountable accordingly. But to give people the opportunity to work, to give people the opportunity to have housing makes us safer. And right now, the balancing test for the courts asks, what is the benefit to the individual versus the harm to the community of expungement? And we need to elevate that conversation to say, not just what is the harm to the community, but what is the benefit to the community when people have access to housing and employment. And I think my time is almost done, but to address criminal justice and address incarceration and not tackle substance abuse and not recognize that this is a fundamental cause and perpetrator and instigator of criminal harms is to not take it seriously. That's my time.
Thanks, Simon. Ryan, you're up next.
Untreated mental health and untreated substance use disorders very often are a product of trauma that is unaddressed. And trauma that is unaddressed can lead to the kinds of crimes that get individuals enmeshed in the criminal legal system from which it is hard to ever get out. These questions are very closely related because when we have people moving through the system because they have been arrested for possession or sale, or for a burglary, or for some other crime that has a lot to do with the addiction they may have or the mental health condition that they have, we're really just repeating the trauma and not healing it. The criminal justice system can be an intervention. We can use diversion, we can use restorative justice, we can use harm reduction as a model for addressing people's needs. That isn't just something that the county attorney can do alone. The systems themselves have to function. Community corrections, probation have to actually function and help people find a better path out. And when people have found a path out, we need to use expungement so that we are removing the barriers to their future success. I've talked to so many people who have crimes in their past that were related to childhood trauma, that related to drugs or even violent acts, who have served their time. They are off paper, they are clear, and they continue constantly to run into barriers for finding work, to finding housing, to be able to pursue a full and active life in our community, the opportunity to vote in many cases. So expungement and harm reduction are at the core of what we need to do for all of those people who are caught up in a society that is pushing trauma in certain communities, concentrated in particular places, and giving few opportunities for people to get out. The criminal justice system should be an opportunity for people to turn things around, not hold them back for the rest of their lives.
Thanks, Ryan. Martha, you're next, please.
Martha, you're still muted.
Thanks, Nadine. I didn't catch that.
Sorry, you can't read my lips. Expungements. It's a complicated issue, and we do have a designated prosecutor that's working on expungements, and they're working on expungements so that you don't even have to go to court. It's complicated, and a lot of times people don't understand how to go through the process, because you have to let a whole bunch of people know. And if you miss one person, then you're never going to get your cases expunged or your case expunged. With restorative justice practices and with diversion, there's pre-trial diversion, and there's pre-plea diversion, and there's post-plea diversion. Pre-plea diversion, if you follow all the rules of the conditions that you have within 60 days or whatever time period you put on it, then your case is done. You're never going to have a record on that case. With post-plea, you have to plea first. If you do, and it's usually with higher risk people, if you do manage to get through your diversion, you come back and there is a minimal sentence that's imposed, maybe STS or maybe electronic home monitoring. We do have treatment courts, drug court, mental health court, and veterans court for PTSD. These are also alternatives to incarceration. And they do work if you're triaged and you meet the recommendations and the assessment points, and there is an agreement between the prosecutor and the defense attorney. You get in. It's much more intensive than probation. They're not perfect courts, but they can be improved and worked on, and it may be expanded so that they can qualify. More people can qualify and get in. But the recidivism rate is low in these types of cases. And I wouldn't incarcerate people for drug offenses. I wouldn't incarcerate them if they have mental health issues. As far as chemical dependency issues, they're not incarcerated if the better route is to go through treatment. So these are available to defendants at this time and have always been available. Thank you.
Thanks, Martha. Paul, you're up, please.
Thank you so much. I do want to thank Majority Leader Winkler on the Clean Slate Act, which is a very important piece of legislation, and having encouraged you to come along on the fentanyl bill and get your colleagues to do that. You know, I have to say, I wrote a letter to both the Majority Leader and to the leaders of the GOP Senate. It frustrates the heck out of me. I strongly believe that there's bipartisan support for the Clean Slate Act. The business community in Minneapolis supports it very strongly because they see it as an issue of human capital, and that act, as I understand it, would increase the number of automatic expungements. And what I see as really an injustice as far as our system of expungement is it depends on who hires an attorney, who maybe has an awareness of the court system, and it shouldn't depend upon that. It should be automatic. And that's why I really hope the Clean Slate Act will pass. I hope the Republicans in the Senate will just vote it up or down, give it a separate vote, because I think the governor would sign it, and I think it would be really, really important. I do really agree with the points made about pre-charge diversion, because then you don't even have a charge. And I'd like to see Hennepin County significantly expand the pre-charge program because of the collateral consequence of even having a felony charge filed against you can be so significant. I do think that low-level drug offenses need to be addressed. But most of the time with low-level drug offenses, and we can get into a philosophical argument or discussion about this, it really is intervening as much as anything to get that person into treatment. It's somebody that needs help. So how do we use what I acknowledge is the heavy hand of government in a way to get someone into treatment without significantly hurting their future in terms of employment and education? That to me, I think, is critical.
Thank you, Paul. Mary, if you could go next, please.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I've always looked at expungement as a tail end kind of thing that can help people who have convictions, but frankly, that's not transformational justice. With the internet these days, even if you get your record expunged, very often people know about it. So I'm going to talk about something that really is transformational change, which I think we need to focus on. Expungement is not going to do anything about violent crime, but here's something that is, and it's something that we have never done here before, but they do it in New York. It is restorative justice for violent offenses, not sexual assault or domestics, for youth between the ages of 16 and 26. And it is optional, and the person who is harmed has to agree to participate. So this woman named Danielle Sered created this program. She's written a marvelous book called Until We Reckon. It is about meaningful accountability instead of punishment. And in a really simple way, it's about, you steal a candy bar. Would you rather have your electronics taken away and be grounded, or marched back to the convenience store, face the person you took it from, hear the impact on them, and do something around the store? And that's really simple, but the idea is you take meaningful accountability for harm that you have done. This is not a couple of circles. Her program is over a year long, but the recidivism rate the rate at which people come back and commit crimes, and remember, this is youth between the ages of 16 and 26 on violent crimes, 7%. 7%. We have nothing close to that. We don't have restorative justice on violent crimes because it's too hard, I think, for the people who are really interested in politics to do the right thing and something that we know works. And that is something I would build out to make as an option for victims who have told me over and over and over they want something different from the county attorney's office. That would be part of transformational justice.
Thanks, Mary. Swati, you get the final word on this. Just question number 3.
Thank you, Mark. Restorative justice is, I think, the future of prosecution. And we've already started it. We've talked about pre-charge diversion. I think that's really important. And for people that worry that, oh, pre-charge diversion, people won't be held accountable. Do you know what pre-charge diversion entails? It entails an in-depth assessment of the defendant or potential defendant, identifying the key areas they need to address, and then they have to address it, and specific things they have to do. And if they don't, we can charge them. But this is so important because you can keep a criminal record off of someone. For example, in Hennepin County, there was someone who wanted to go to medical school and who had excellent grades and was studying hard for it. And there was a substance, I think it was ecstasy, found in the community room that in the suite, all the doors connected to. Her medical school application could have just completely been impacted. These sorts of things are real, and we can exclude people that have so much potential from being full productive members of society. I'm a big fan of pre-charge diversion, and when I'm Hennepin County Attorney, I will continue to expand that. But something that I'm especially interested in is doubling the size of treatment court. There are plenty of cases that have already been charged that are in the system. We have mental health court, we have addiction court, we have DWI court, and it addresses the root cause of the problem, and it requires defendants to go to court every week. It's a holistic wraparound set of services, and it's also designed to address the core root of the issue. Part of my platform is public safety, police accountability, and racial equity, but I have more, and that's reducing crime in the first place. And when we address the core issues for people, it reduces the chances of them committing crime. That's more beneficial for our whole community. It's my time, and I could talk on and on, but thank you so much for the question, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Swati, and thanks for staying in time. So I have this next question as well, and then Nadine's going to bring us home with the final question. Question number 4, and ask me if you'd like more clarification on this. Hopefully, it'll bring out some creative juices. Are there areas of work or powers of the office that you think are currently and have not been utilized fully, have not been utilized at all, or underutilized? If so, what would you do differently? And I'm the order this time will be Ryan, then Paul, Mary, Swati, and then Martha. Anybody have any questions on that one? All right, Ryan, why don't you lead us off then, please?
So if we want to understand safety in our communities and what our communities need, we need to be present and listen. We need to hear what the challenges are. One thing I've heard, in addition to concerns about crime on the north side, has been Northern Metals, a company that has been polluting the air and hurting people for many years while falsifying records and committing environmental crimes. We have no effective system right now for civil investigations at the state to be transferred to the county prosecutor for potential prosecution. The county attorney also can play a significant role in environmental protection by enforcing permits and backing up local units of government in their enforcement. So there's a significant environmental role. The county attorney can also lead the way on enforcing laws on labor trafficking, on wage theft and the ways that workers are exploited in this economy. Just today, I was at a job site in Plymouth talking to workers who were not being paid according to the prevailing wage law that applied in their case. We have people who are exploited daily across the county in many industries based on their inability to protect their own rights in the workplace. There's also, I think, a significant role for the county attorney to play in restorative justice. And that is beyond simply making differences in decision-making within the office, but also looking at past harms. How have we made decisions that have incarcerated people at disproportionate rates? What can we do to address it? How can we be policy leaders? How can we work across systems to make these systems function and change differently? It's a public leadership role. And that also has been missing. And the last thing I would say is that the county attorney needs to be present in the community on a regular basis, taking feedback, taking heat if necessary, and being accountable to the people who elected the county attorney. That has to be a direct engagement, and it's a critical part of building trust in the job.
Thanks, Ryan. Paul, you are next, please.
Thank you so much, Mark. There are a number of ways in which I believe the county attorney can be a leader. And that really is the most important question before the voters is who is the person who can lead the office? And first of all, I think there's a very much of a need to repair the relationship between the county attorney's office and law enforcement. We've appropriately spoken about police accountability, but I continue to believe the vast majority of those in law enforcement want to do the right thing and they want to learn. And there's nothing I've enjoyed more than partnering with law enforcement where I make them better and they make me better in the work that I do. I think that's really important work for the next county attorney. I think it's really important that the Hennepin County Attorney, as probably the highest profile prosecutor in the state of Minnesota, be an honest broker. That includes at the legislature. That's why I continue to believe that running as a nonpartisan candidate, somebody who can bridge divides at the legislature and advocate for criminal justice reform and accountability will be very important. I do want to be someone who convenes and brings people together. The downtown safety issues are huge. I want to make sure that I downtown. I believe we need a massive effort on fentanyl in terms of not just prosecution, but community, but a public health and also a public messaging campaign. I've done this type of work. I was the vice chair of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Committee when I served in the city council. I want to revitalize that committee, which brought together the public defenders, corrections. I want to broaden it, bring in legislators, bring in business communities. How collectively do we do this this very important work? I agree with those who said this is a very public leadership position. The last thing I would say is I want to encourage an ethic of service, but also community involvement in the people in the office. I want the county attorneys that I work with and the staff to invest themselves, volunteer in the community. I want to find ways to promote that so they understand the community that they're serving.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Mary, you're next, please.
Thank you. Wage theft and economic crimes are very important, but I want to talk about two other issues to spend my time on. One is sexual assault. I was very surprised to hear from many, many different victims and victim advocacy groups that people going to testify in sexual assault trials aren't prepared by the county attorney's office. They're not talked to by the prosecutor about what is going to happen to them, what questions they're going to get, which was rather horrifying to me as a teacher of trial skills, but also it's incredibly cruel to put somebody through that situation without preparing them for what's going to happen to them. I would change that. There needs to be communication. There needs to be not a transactional relationship, which I've heard from many people that it's the county attorney's office wanting the longest sentence possible and not really listening to the needs of the person who's actually been harmed. So I would change that to center the person who's been harmed and hear what they have to say. Second thing is immigration. As when I was at the public defender's office, I created a policy that all of our lawyers would interview and screen all clients for potential immigration consequences. The county attorney's office does not have such a policy. It's very hit or miss. Some prosecutors care about potential immigration consequences, some don't. And, you know, you can help somebody not be deported to a country that they haven't been to since they were 2 years old, who has a family here, by something as simple as making a sentence 365 days instead of 360, or 364 instead of 365. So I would make sure that people, or that the office has a policy that immigration consequences must be considered. I know that one other candidate on here told us at another forum that immigrants that appeared before her were rapists and murderers, which is simply not true, and that they shouldn't get any special consideration. I'm not talking about special consideration. I'm talking about keeping families together and keeping people here who are part of the fabric of the community, if it's possible.
Thanks, Mary. Let's see, where are we at? Sir Swati, you're next, please.
Thank you. There's so many parts of the Hennepin County Attorney's Office that has been underutilized. I want to say so much, but I have 2 minutes, so I'll just pick two. One of them is expungements. I know it's been minimized earlier on, but the thing is, when you have a conviction on your record, and let's say it's been a long time, you've done your time or you're off probation, it can impact so many things. Housing, years and years down the road, education loans. There's so many pieces of life where things can get impacted. And I work at the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, and we created an expungement and collateral consequences unit. I want to do the same thing in Hennepin County and scale it up. I want the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, which has taxpayer dollars, to be reaching out to folks that have old convictions and taking their incentive to undo past convictions when it's appropriate to do so. There's certain lists of cases under the statute where you can do that. The Washington County Attorney's Office has partnered with the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. The Hennepin County Attorney's Office should be doing the same thing too. I think it might have already been time, but.
So you have a little more time.
Oh, I do? Okay. When it comes to collateral consequences, I think some people have already discussed this, but you know, collateral consequences, there's so many ramifications from a criminal conviction, and they can be different for people that are immigrants. What I saw under the previous presidential administration was that folks with low-level drug crimes, they were deported even though they were here legally or they had a visa. And when they were deported, their kids were still here. And what happened to them? The Hennepin County Attorney's Office, just like the Ramsey County Attorney's Office, we have to then take the kids into the system because their parents are gone. Does this benefit society because the kids are Americans and their parents have lost their rights? It just doesn't make sense. And so when it's equitable and fair to do that in certain types of cases, I think it's worth taking that extra time to make sure if that opportunity is available. Thank you.
Thank you. Martha, if you could go next, please.
Thank you. Let's see, the areas that I think the office could improve on is that they have a community outreach unit. And it is important that we get out into the community and let them know who we are and let them know that we work for them. That's very important. I'd like to see more people with their emphasis placed on reaching the community members come and visit over north. It's not all that dangerous, and don't be afraid of the neighborhoods. I've also talked at Bishop Hall asked me to speak at a Shiloh and address his congregation specifically, not only about my platform, but about some of the issues in our community. And one of the things that I did express is that I know that all of us who have lived there, like I said, I've lived over north for almost 20 years. Many of us, we know who some of these criminals are. And if we could just build a more solid foundation with the police department so that people feel comfortable reporting the crimes, that would be an added plus. I also think we talked about the increase in caseload. When I left the bench, I had over 360 cases on my docket. And I know that the county attorney's office is overextended also. They've also lost 6 county attorneys to other offices because they're fearful of who's going to be the next county attorney. And I just think that we have to readjust our priorities in processing cases. And I do agree with some of the things that I think Ms. Singh raised. The issue is we got to take our focus away from lower level crimes and concentrate our energies on violent crimes. I think the office has to be more transparent. That's something that I think is really a deficit right now. If you don't have a case ready to be charged, at least keep the public apprised of where you're at in the case, and certainly address those issues as they come up. But we have to be more transparent. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon, you get the last word on this question, then Nadine will take us into our final question.
Thank you. A couple of big areas. Well, first, I want to say we mentioned, one candidate mentioned Danielle Sered, and I know that she's a friend of the MJRC's, and her work is extraordinary and absolutely needs to be brought. Models like that need to be brought to Hennepin County and scaled, and I hope we can all commit to that, even and perhaps especially in violent crimes. One thing that the Office of County Attorney has not done and can do is become more aggressive in civil litigation, plaintiff-based litigation. The Attorney General has been very effective in doing that and has a long tradition of that. The largest settlement in state history was not a private settlement, but was the Attorney General's office holding big tobacco accountable. In the state of Minnesota, I was talking to a scholar just several weeks ago. They said that a Black family making $130,000 a year is less likely to be qualified for a loan than a white family making $130,000 a year. That is a disparity, and credit only counts for a third of that. That is outrageous. And the county attorney has the capacity to bring larger scale civil and civil rights litigation. We can partner with external partners to hold large institutions accountable when it comes to issues of environmental justice and equitable treatment of our citizens here in Hennepin County. We have the opportunity and the obligation as the county's attorney, not just the DA, but as the county's attorney, to advocate for our citizens and hold institutional actors accountable. That's one opportunity that the county attorney has. Additionally, just in reference to expungements. Expungements are absolutely a barrier to employment, and a barrier to employment is an invitation to further crime. We need a prison to labor pipeline. That's not something that the county attorney can do alone, but we have a labor shortage and we have a surplus of labor that's sitting on the sidelines, and it's good for public safety. It's good for economic development. It is incredibly powerful for our state, for the next Hennepin County attorney to lead in this space.
Well, thank you all. Great responses for all of our questions. Lastly, we'd like to end our time tonight by giving all of you an opportunity to give us a 2-minute closing statement to our audience. I'll start with Swati.
Thank you, Nadine. My name is Swati Singh, and I'm running for Hennepin County Attorney. My name is pronounced Swati, and my last name is Singh. I am running to be the top prosecutor for Minneapolis and the surrounding area, and I'm a progressive prosecutor. I handle murder, sexual assault, domestic assault cases, and everything in between. And I'm the right person at the right time for the right job. I am a prosecutor in Ramsey County. I worked at the Minnesota Attorney General's office doing both criminal and civil cases, and the Hennepin County Attorney's Office does criminal and civil cases. I've worked for 2 federal judges. I've worked in Hennepin County itself for a judge where public defenders and prosecutors appear in front of me, and I wrote orders. I worked at the U.S. Attorney's Office on civil rights cases and worked at legal aid on working with clients with Social Security disability benefit needs. I also have the leadership experience. Governor Walz appointed me to the Council of Asian Pacific Minnesotans. I oversee the state agency. I was elected to 4 terms of the American Constitution Society, the nation's largest national legal progressive network. And I was the president here in Minnesota. I've done hiring. I've done recruiting for the Ramsey County Attorney's Office. I've managed the Government Affairs Department. I've done all of that. And not only that, I'm the only candidate in this race with a national endorsement. I've been endorsed by John Choi. I've been endorsed by both leaders of the Posse Caucus. So Representative Esther Agbaje, who represents parts of North Minneapolis and downtown Minneapolis, and Representative Athena Hollins. My name is Swati Singh, and I'm running for a Hennepin County Attorney. I'm a progressive prosecutor, a Hindu, and the daughter of Indian immigrants. And I'm going to bring all this life experience with me. And I know I look young. Age is often a proxy for experience, but I have the experience. I'm 37. I'm the same age as Amy Klobuchar when she first ran and won for Hennepin County Attorney. She was the first woman in that office, and I'm going to be the first woman of color. Let's make history together. Thank you.
Thank you, Saraswati. Next is Ryan.
Well, I just have to say that I find the energy and passion and enthusiasm of Saraswati pretty inspiring. And I want to say thanks to all of the candidates who are running. We have a tremendous opportunity in this county to elect a new county attorney full of fresh ideas, new energy, a new approach to a more holistic approach to public safety, to innovate and find approaches to preventing crime that will actually work, and to begin, or not to begin, but to continue the process of addressing the deep racial disparities that have plagued our criminal justice system. This is a tremendous opportunity. And I think that forums like this are crucial for our ability as a community to decide how we move forward together. There are differences of opinion, but for the most part, this group of candidates is interested in doing the same kind of work. I'm running for this office because I think public safety in Hennepin County is the biggest challenge we face in Minnesota today. If we cannot address the disparities, the distrust, and the rising crime that we are experiencing, our community will be poor and not the kind of place that reflects our values, not the kind of place where we want to raise children, not the kind of place we want to lead for the next generation. My experience at the state legislature over the last 15 years has been in finding common ground, identifying solutions to problems together, putting the community at the center of our decision-making, and then making sure we are holding the people carrying out that action accountable. We need to be able to work across our divisions. We need to be able to engage with law enforcement. We need to be able to engage with the community. We need to be able to bring people together. I think the experience of leading this state through one of the most challenging 4-year periods we have lived through is a great start for the challenges of being the next Hennepin County Attorney. And I am here to ask for your vote and your support.
Thank you, Ryan. Next up is Mary.
I'm going to say, with all due respect, we do not have the same ideas about how to transform this system. Some of us have very different agendas and goals here. And if we're really looking for transformational justice, we need to look at real change, not just nibbling around the edges. We also need to look at the person who is actually going to make this change. It takes courage to stand up and do the right thing, because the consequences can be great. So when you think about who to vote for Hennepin County Attorney, think about who has stood up in the past, who has spent a lot of time in North Minneapolis, as I have. I have been at marches for police brutality, as I have been at marches and vigils for the 3 Black children who were shot in the head. I care about all those kids. I care about the people in North Minneapolis. I care about the people in Bloomington. Everybody deserves to be safe. But to do that, we need to make transformational change. Transformational changes that sound kind of scary maybe to some people. So we have to have the courage to do it. And we can't be thinking about using this as a stepping stone to some other type of political role. We have to elect somebody who is going to make decisions aligned with her values that are based on data and research and programs that we know actually work. We have to elect somebody who actually has criminal law expertise, 31 years of it, 31 years of it. We have to elect somebody who's actually led and managed a large law office of over 120 lawyers, who has worked with management, who has worked with unions. We need somebody to step up and match the moment right now. And so I'm asking all of you, as we approach the DFL caucus, the convention a week from Saturday, and then the primary after that, to really look at all of us and see that there are major differences. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mary. Next up is Simon.
Thank you, Nadine, and thank you for an incredible opportunity to share what our alignments, and I think our alignments are powerful, and our differences. Our differences are also really significant. Two things that I want to mention in my closing time that I didn't mention before, and what you can know about me, you can know what I'm going to do because you can look at what I've done. With our law firm, when an incredible activist and young man, Noah McCourt, came to our office and said, I'm a returning citizen, I am on probation, I can't participate in the Democratic caucuses, what can I do? Is that constitutional? We had the privilege and we took the power all the way to the appellate court, and we earned his right to participate in caucuses. And now for the first time, folks in the Democratic caucus and the convention are able to participate as returning citizens on probation in their democratic process. They have more constitutional rights because we had guts, we had discernment, and Noah had courage to put his life and his experience forward. I also, as a council member, not just advocated for my city, I created an organization with the help of a lot of partners. We have dozens of cities, city electeds, city leaders against wage theft and tax fraud. One of the problems, one of the reasons wage theft is never prosecuted is because police officers currently will not take those criminal complaints. They will not take those complaints. They will not investigate them. And part of what this role requires is not just an iron will. You need an iron will, but you need a movement of people. You need alignment at the city level, at the Met Council, at the state level. You should vote for me because when you look at my leadership, you look how I've led my team of attorneys, how we brought a city that's more diverse than the city of Minneapolis and a majority Latino council. And at the time I was elected, a 100% Caucasian executive management and supervisory team. And we have brought transformational change. We have brought extraordinary leadership, connection, and accountability. And that's what we can have in the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. Simon Troutman for countyattorney.com. I hope you check it out. I hope you volunteer. I hope you donate. And I hope to see you on May 14th. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Simon. Next up is Martha. You're on mute, Martha.
Thank you. I'm so used to having a law clerk help me out here. I'm glad to hear that based on all the conversations that we've had this evening, that we do agree on one thing, and that's about public safety. And that does include police reform and violent crime reduction. Public safety is the reason I'm running. And it's not just a political slogan for me. As a former community prosecutor and a serious crimes judge, it's my profession. And as someone who lives on the North Side and felt the effects of the rise in violence in my Black neighborhoods, it's my life. Some people are going to tell you that enforcement and prosecution is not worth it because the system is not perfect. And they're right, the system is not perfect. And that's why we have to make it better. But we can't throw our hands up and walk away. Prosecution is still a worthy cause for me. In fact, I think it's more important than ever. To do the right thing, we have to work with our justice partners, the attorneys in our office, and the community. I'm the only person in this forum who has managed a prosecutor's office. There is a difference between prosecution and defense work. And there's very different perspectives coming in from those different opinions. Not only that, but the office that I worked for, the Hennepin County Attorney's Office, they liked me and they felt valued, heard, and respected. Ultimately, the experience that I have and the relationships that I maintain will allow me to have courageous decisions with the support of our partners. I'm not going to allow activists, police officers, or anyone else to dictate how we charge cases. We have the experience and we can make those decisions on our own. We're ready for a new day in Hennepin County Attorney's Office, and I would be honored to have all of your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Last but certainly not least is Paul.
Thank you so much, Nadine, and thank you, everyone. People don't feel safe if they don't have confidence in their leaders. So the most important decision for people to make is going to be who from day one can be the leader that is needed that will make people feel confident in the work of the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. I have experienced both as a political leader, someone who led Minneapolis through a historic period of reform, but also a quarter century of prosecution experience. I've been active in my own community, in my neighborhood, for almost countless nonprofit efforts since I left public office. I'm known for my integrity, my toughness, and my compassion. I'm known as a problem solver. What we need in this position is not only experience, but we need independence. It's not easy for me to turn away from so many of my DFL friends and say, I'm not asking for your endorsement. That is a path less traveled. But I have yet to hear a single person tell me and give any reason why the position of county attorney should be a partisan position, when one of the most important fundamental truths of our judiciary and of any prosecution is that you do so without fear or favor. Prosecution, justice, knows no political party. I've shown my independence. I've spoken and held those in power accountable. I will continue to do that as county attorney. And I will ensure that the law is fair to everyone. That's why I've been a leader in challenging the processes in Minneapolis that have hidden police discipline records. I will make sure that police officers are treated fairly, just as I will make sure that those who are defendants will be treated fairly. I will serve as a minister of justice. I will serve with a passion for the people I represent to keep them safe and to restore their confidence in the institutions that are so important to the future of Hennepin County. Thank you, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be with everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all for all of your expertise that you've shared today and informing the public, informing your residents and fellow residents of why you're running for this position. I've heard a lot of great things. You've given me, and I'm sure everyone else, a lot to further research on each of one of your policies. As someone who has benefited from it, an expungement, it's good to hear about people's positions on expungements, but I do believe that had I had the opportunity to have some pre-diversion option prior to getting into the criminal legal system, my path to where I am now would have been a lot more smoother. So I thank you all for those points that have been shared. I'll pass the mic to Mike.
Thanks, Nadine. I just want to second those thanks. You all know that I know the amount of commitment and work it takes to run for an office like this. And I hope that everybody in this election and the audience today understands that, you know, regardless of whether they agree with your policies or not, or like you or not, you all have stepped into the arena. It's challenging. It takes huge commitment and sometimes sacrifice. And I think that you deserve all of our respect and gratitude for that. As a resident of Hennepin County, you certainly have my gratitude. Thank you. It's great to see such a great slate of candidates for this important office. And thanks for everybody who joined us today. One thing I want to make clear, it was mentioned earlier, but if you don't know this is really important about this election. As we've heard, this is a nonpartisan office. That means there's no party designation on that election ballot in November. And so what that means coming up is that, yes, there's a DFL endorsement convention, which I think most of the candidates will be seeking, but they may not all decide to abide by that endorsement, or it's possible there wouldn't be an endorsement. Regardless of what happens there, there's likely to be a large number of candidates on the primary ballot, which is in August. And because this is nonpartisan, there won't be a Republican primary and a Democratic primary. There'll be one primary. So that will whittle this race down to 2 people. So that's a huge choice, right? To go from this large slate of good candidates to just 2. So that's, a real plug to attend the primary and get your friends and families in Hennepin County to get educated and attend the primary as well. With that, I think I'll hand it over to, is it Justin? You gonna wrap us up, Justin?
Thank you so much, Mark, and for all that helpful information. Thank you, Nadine and Mark, for moderating a really great conversation. It's 8 o'clock, so I gotta go put my boys down. But I want to say thank you to the candidates and to everyone who showed up and provided questions that got us thinking and trying to frame this conversation. I hope that we did a good job raising the issues that folks find important. And I want to say a special shout out to my team. So Dr. Katie Remington Cunningham, Carol Latosky, and a big shout out to my boy Zeke. Welcome home, Zeke. And Corey, our intern from Hamlin. That's right, brother. And we are so thankful for the support from the Minneapolis Foundation from Shonda and from Brandon and Patrice. And I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. We will be following up with folks. We'll allow the candidates to select some questions that they would like to respond to in writing, and we will share those questions with those answers with the community. Since we got over 45 questions from RSVPs, and so we feel like we got to do something with that. And then the last thing I'll say is that this video will be edited and we'll be posting it online. So please share that as an educational tool for folks who need to participate in this election. The last thing I want to say is just a reminder that our founder, someone brought up our founder earlier, Tom Johnson, had a very simple idea that people have more values in common than we tend to admit. So if you can identify those shared values, you can put data behind them, you can build a pathway towards meaningful transformational change. That's what happened last week when you saw that report dropped by Commissioner Lucero. It put data behind experiences that we've been feeling and knowing in our community for generations. That is the kind of work that we aim to do, and we're proud to partner with Commissioner Lucero on that work, and we're proud to partner with the community. We'll be out all summer doing that work. Please support this organization so we can continue to bring you programming like this. And then the last thing I will say, and get you guys out of here, is that, I have the privilege of knowing some amazing organizers, people like Dorsey Nunn, Norris Henderson, Desmond Meade, who's a MacArthur Genius Fellow. And these guys, they've taught me, most of what I know about organizing. And the one thing that we would do when we would get together is that we would sing a song. I'm not going to sing for you, but the last refrain of the song would say that we are fearless, we are strong, and we are ready to carry on. And if I can't think of a more appropriate message for Hennepin County and the city of Minneapolis right now, hey, y'all, be fearless, stay strong, and let's get through this madness together and just carry on down the path towards justice. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you for your support. Get out and vote. Blessings.